Hello and welcome to Kinship Earth Connections. I'm your host, Lauren Archer, Executive Director of Kinship Earth. On behalf of our founders, Susan Davis Mora, Walter Mora, and Stephen Gomes, our advisory team, our donors, members, and extended community of kindred spirits, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. Before I introduce today's featured influencers, Caitlin Archambault and Jamaica Stevens, I'd like to share a bit about the KINS Network phenomena for those of you who are new to our community. For over 40 years, Susan Davis Mora has established over 40 KINS innovation networks of heart-centered earth advocates who are working all over the world to raise consciousness, to transform our global economy and systems from fear and greed to generosity and love. KINS members recognize that we are part of one whole interconnected living system, and our greatest passion is spontaneously collaborating on projects and initiatives that are collectively ushering in the regenerative renaissance. We are playing what Buckminster Fuller called the world game, with a goal of making humans net positive to nature. And we play using the strategy of generosity, where we only win when we all win. At each Kinship Earth Connections event, we introduce members of the KINS community to share progress on our initiatives, help facilitate introductions and strategic alliances, and foster our growing community as one global network. Today, we are delighted to welcome two amazing kindred spirits, Caitlin Archambault and Jamaica Stevens, co-founders of Open Future Coalition, developing social, technological, and economic tools for resourcing community-based solutions at global scale. With experiences that range from designing institutional-grade financial services platforms to leading global organizations through complex rebrands, Caitlin Archambault has spent much of her time ensuring that technology is thoughtfully constructed for the greater good, taking into account issues of governance, compliance, and ethics. Prior to founding Open Future Coalition, Caitlin spent over a decade as a designer, creative director, and communications strategist, growing and leading creative and product teams, and launching social impact brands on 5 continents. Caitlin founded Brooklyn-based studio Incendiary Designs in 2013 and has advanced policy and thought leadership programs for outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and The Hill. Caitlin's background is in public art and grassroots movement building, and she is a fierce advocate for issues of liberation and economic equity. Jamaica Stevens is the author and curator of Re-inhabiting the Village, Co-creating Our Future, a collection of essays on village ethics and regenerative principles for social transformation and ecological reintegration for communities of practice and place. As a social architect, strategist, facilitator, storyteller, and seasoned event producer, she leverages cooperative processes, living systems principles, and transformative convenings to empower people, communities, and organizations to thrive as social ecosystems integrated as part of a living system. Like mycorrhizal functions in an ecosystem, Jamaica strategically connects nodes within networks, weaving webs of reciprocal value, strengthening the capacity for coordinating global movements of locally based planetary solutions. We are delighted to be partnering with Caitlin, Jamaica, and the team at the Open Future Coalition and to introduce you to the multi-sided ecosystem that we are co-creating. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I want to invite you to give us a high-level overview of this amazing ecosystem and platform that you've been building, and give us a little hint of the vision and the capacity of what it can do. Welcome.
Very sweet introduction, Lauren. Thank you very kindly. Nice to be here with you all.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be connecting with such an aligned community. Lauren, when you shared the initial purpose of Kinship Earth, I hadn't heard it framed exactly that way before, and I could easily point to that and say, well, that's our mission too. And so pleased to be sharing with such an aligned community and continue to explore how we can all work together. I'll give a brief overview of kind of why we're here and our mission, and then we'll dive into some more of the specifics of our platform and the ways that we've been looking at playing together specifically with the Kinship Earth network. And in short, I would say that we're here recognizing that there are already so many incredible communities and projects all around us that are already doing the work of solving some of the world's most pressing issues. And we've seen a lot of commotion around how are we possibly going to mobilize to solve all these crises? How are we possibly going to mobilize the funding? And our perspective is that the solutions are already here. They're just perpetually kind of disconnected from one another and disconnected from many of the resources that they need. And so much of our effort has been looking at how we can better connect those who are already doing so that they can do so more effectively and at scale, and really direct the right resources to the right efforts at the right time. And we look at that through a multi-capital lens. So it's not just financial capital, but people's time and their knowledge. And so we started our adventure in supporting that through the launch of a platform called Open Impact. We launched the alpha of that at the end of last year with 30 organizations in 13 countries. And we started looking at this kind of non-financial capacity building of projects. How do we solve complex coordinative challenges on the ground within and between efforts and organizations? And so anything from how do we solve the complexity of multiple agencies being deployed to a single place within areas of displacement who oftentimes are deployed in parallel and aren't communicating with one another, to how do we help bring together thousands of women smallholder farmers in West Africa who are currently unable to compete at price with large producers of commodities who are using traditional form or conventional forms of agriculture and even child labor. We recognize that when equipped to share resources and share infrastructure and communicate and learn forward collectively at scale, that these cohorts of those that are moving in common can have a greater collective capacity to shift some of these global, even geopolitics at scale. And so those are the types of efforts that we've been embarking upon so far within organizations, within particular projects, and then moving into looking at how we can effectively advance entire sort of communities of practice and networks. And so we launched with initial communities of practice in areas like regenerative agriculture, water, community wellness, and then more recently have started delving into this question of how do we kind of connect entire networks with other networks. And so that's where we're thrilled to be partnering with networks like Kinship Earth to start to model how do you bring not only organizations together or small groups together, but how do you bring together hundreds or thousands of organizations with other communities within hundreds or thousands of organizations. And so we're right now entering the beta of that platform and nurturing these types of partnerships. And we're also starting to engage some additional tooling around funding and monitoring of impacts, which we'll get into in a little bit. We're working with about 170 organizations right now in 16 countries, so we're growing. And we'll share a little bit more of that roadmap, but handing it over to Jamaica to share some more about our ethos and kind of what we're about.
Oh, feel free to unmute yourself, Jamaica. There you go.
I think I'm unmuting. Yeah. Yeah, I'll just add to that, that along with our efforts to leverage and build out and then leverage the Open Impact platform, a big part of our work has been about the social ecosystems that we're cultivating. And so through the various working groups we've been hosting, our upcoming Open Future Forum, and just growing a network of partnerships, our approach has been very much a distributed and yet interconnected web of this sort of interoperable efforts. And I think a big part of our work has been that the culture of how we do and why we do what we do is everything. So we've been working a lot on ensuring that the foundational culture is what we're building, the partners we've selected and the way that we've grown, what otherwise some people might, when you look at traditional SaaS platforms or just technology for the sake of technology, that's not what we're in service to. What we're in service to is the flourishing, the planetary flourishing, of the restoration of the biosphere, the restoration and liberation, collaboration of peoples, of place, and of culture. And so for us, we realize we have to create this web of mutual upliftment and advancement. And what we've seen is the radical kind of constant siloization and sort of lack of coordination and resource sharing among that groundswell of peoples of place that are doing the work. The solutions are there. We're efforting every day to try to be a responsive, like an immune response to the planetary sort of challenges and crises, and also social and political and economic crises. But we need each other to do that. And a big part of our work has not been just to be yet another platform or yet another tool, but to really ensure that we are, through the whole stack of our integrity, everything we do is about mutuality, and everything we do is about mutual uplifting and advancement of a collective commons. And so a lot of what we're working on is sort of the social, economic, tech, but also spiritual ability to co-liberate. So that's really important to know about us. And we value circular leadership. We try to find ways to sort of create win-win, where usually people might be competitive in our kind of way of approach. Everything we do is, well, how can we be mutual? What can we do to uplift? How does what you're already building or you're already doing sort of fit in and create a dock port of this sort of radical nodal network that's really making sure that we're touching down, that it doesn't sort of stay in the Web3 space or sort of the noosphere, but that everything touches down and is about building community resilience in place, and is about actually helping each of us become the leaders we have to be water stewardship, watershed steward protectors, and work with our own local food sheds and be advocates of our own local community resilience. And how do we do that at this incredible swell pattern or scale that's required at this time of just great transition happening on the planet? We need as many people as possible to be resourced, connected, and growing forward together, and accessing the collective intelligence to be able to respond well together to what is facing so many communities and so many people. So that's been a big part of our work, is to grow this rich ecosystem of partnerships. And to that end, we're super thrilled to have Kinship Earth be one of our flagship networks, because we see the rich, beautiful, alive, sort of grounded and practical and yet deeply spiritual, evolutionary sort of work that you all are doing. And it just felt like such an aligned network to partner how we can grow networks together, leveraging digital tools, but realizing that that's just to sort of grow the fruits of our common capacity together. So that's what we're really in service to. And it's really a joy to get to do this with you all.
You see why I'm so excited to introduce everyone to these two. You guys can share screen, by the way, if you have anything to show and tell. And I put a note in the chat. So it is live, our beta group. So if anyone wants to go ahead and join, and you're going to find out in a few minutes as Caitlin and Jamaica continue their presentation, why this is such an awesome place to be. And you're going to want to be part of this community.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. I'll take that cue and hop right into sharing screen here.
Awesome.
All right. So this is a view of our open impact platform. I'll also show you specifically the community that we've set up for Kinship Earth towards the end. But our aim here, as you'll see, has been initially to really help networks better see themselves. And so we're on board everything from discrete organizations to groups that are coming together around a common topic. It can be uniting organizations or projects that are all working on agroforestry or along a particular watershed. We allow kind of the flexibility for communities to come together around a particular purpose or a particular place. And so you'll see right here our initial kind of directory of groups that we've been piloting with. And as Jamaica mentioned, we've really been nurturing initially kind of this network of trust and of efforts that we find are really advancing kind of work in common. How groups are able to stand up projects together. And so one thing that we've done is really take kind of the act of convening and spaces for networks to communicate and advance knowledge and best practices, which you'll see in a moment, but also combine that with kind of rigorous project and process management so that we can handle kind of complex coordinative challenges at scale, and so that you're not kind of convening over here and doing over there. We're hoping to help transition anything from networks to events to workshops from that act of talking directly into that act of doing. And then we also allow people to set up their own profiles, and this can be anything from collaborators within a particular network or effort to volunteers to technical assistance providers. So for example, we work with universities or with municipalities to bring on folks that are providing assistance in areas like health and human services or mentorship. We can even log mentor hours. And so we allow folks to, for now, kind of flag what purposes they're kind of generally in service of and what skills and knowledge they have on offer. And these are categories we've been refining together with our community, and that'll evolve kind of together over time. But to start, we're starting to kind of help that network be able to better see itself and help us find other collaborators or kindreds who we can work with in common. One other piece that I'll kind of dive into here before I get into the detail is that we can also help folks find others kind of near where they are. This is the very minimum kind of initial view of our mapping, and we're really excited around where this is going to grow. And so a quick peek at that roadmap is that in addition to helping folks find people that are working on, for example, similar topics that they care about near them, or to dive into particular projects to discover more around how they can help, whether it's with their time, their skills, their knowledge, or their capital, their financial capital rather. We also are starting to partner with, for example, media or campaigns. And so one piece that we're really excited to delve into in the coming months is right now we're seeing this phenomenon where, for example, young people might watch a documentary about climate crisis and get to the end and feel so discouraged. You know, this feels like such a big undertaking that we're inheriting. How can I possibly do something to help? There often isn't a specific call to action for some of these campaigns. And so we're starting to partner with media and campaigns to run specific calls to action, such as here's a list of specific projects that are near you that are working on this issue. And you can volunteer an hour, you can put in $1, and in aggregate, you can start to show how that swell of millions of individuals can indeed move the needle. But we can also offer kind of in-kind actions, templates for, here's how you go and plant a pollinator garden in your backyard, or go collect a soil sample. We're starting to get into things like citizen science. And so we're excited for the potentials of mapping to start to be able to reflect back, and rather than having a research study that's done top down that can take months or years, to be able to, in a distributed way, push out this call to action and then get back images and videos and data and story from millions of community members and reflect that back. And to start, much of our collaboration is really happening on this project or group level. So I'm going to dive into there. And you'll see as you get involved more in the community that we've set up for Kinship Earth that there's some groups set up there to hold some of that initial interactivity. I'm going to bring us into a project to start. Projects and groups are quite similar, but projects can be pretty dynamic because they have the project management in them as well. And so projects and groups are very similar, but projects are kind of time-bound, measurable, fundable efforts, which you'll see in a moment when I show what our beta looks like. But these are the initial kind of community tools that we launched with. And so you'll see that we really combine this space for the act of kind of convening and deciding together and sharing knowledge or inquiry, and the space for doing. And so I might drop into this space with particular collaborators where we have a shared calendar, we have kind of pinned attachments, we have a news feed to engage. But then I also see right here a whole list of tasks, whether they're kind of volunteer tasks, whether it can get pretty complex if you're working on a particular project that's data or content driven. And so you'll see here, I'm actually in the middle of a peer reviewed kind of distributed research workflow. And so we can get kind of that complex and have multiple folks collaborating on a shared document. This can just as well be a curriculum. And so we can have self-guided curricula or workshops where at the outset, rather than waiting for the time of a particular event or course, you can have all of your pre-reading in one place. And we really try to keep it simple so that everyone sees exactly what they need to see when they need to see it. And so I see right here only my tasks that are due for me right now. But if I'm managing this, you'll see that I'm actually managing this whole kind of more complex workflow that's going to multiple peer reviewers and so on. I won't get into the weeds on that one, but just know that we could do a lot kind of with workflows. And one piece we're particularly excited about there is now that we work with practitioners on the ground working on particular efforts. We're sitting with them, for example, we're working right now with Indigenous stewarded land restoration projects. And we're sitting and saying, what is your current process? What are you currently measuring? And we can publish that template. And we oftentimes see this tension between kind of fidelity and scale. You know, I tend to argue that part of how we've gotten ourselves into this mess over the last century in particular is that we've had this runaway scaling, but we've lost context. And so we're really looking at issues of scaling where someone's done something really well 1, 3, 5 times, and they're at this point of how do I get to 100? How do I get to 1,000? And a living systems approach to that doesn't look like copying and pasting. It looks a lot more like responding and learning from one another. And so with workflows like this one, we can actually start to publish templates saying, this is how I did this eco restoration project in this region. And if you want to go and take it and apply it where you are, you can, but you can also diversify it. And sort of adopt it and learn together. And rather than doing that in a silo, we're going to add you to a group like this one with everyone else who's using that same workflow globally. And so we can collectively participate in shared learning and inquiry and advance some of these solutions together. And so part of our future vision is this kind of global library of regionally appropriate solutions so that we can start to break some of that tension between fidelity and listening and learning and scale. And one of the other main aspects that I think will be useful for the kinship earth community in your spaces as well are discussions. And so every project, every group has its own discussions. They can be tagged, filtered. You can decide exactly who's on what discussion. So if you're trying to have kind of a small breakout with people where you're organizing something and it's not relevant to share it with the whole group, you can keep it smaller. But just as well, we've really focused on how do we break down silos and allow for greater kind of permeability of knowledge sharing. And so you'll see when I go to my profile, I actually see all of the discussions that I'm a part of across all of my different projects and groups, so that we're trying to kind of entrain this habit of, rather than creating a brand new thread every time I have a question, let me go search and see if someone else is talking about this and invite the right people to that conversation instead. And so we're really looking forward to continuing to advance some of that dialogue around kind of dynamic knowledge and wisdom sharing and how we can learn in that together. And then the last piece, by kind of having our community sort of members listed, we can also start to think, well, who was it again that, you know, was good at accounting? So you can start to think about who's best to assign to what conversation or to what task, kind of based on their self-verified backgrounds. So that's the quick overview of some of our spaces. We also have groups that are kind of that umbrella. Let me come to an example here. And so you'll see groups are structured really similarly, but they can have their whole kind of lists of projects all in one place. And can provide, they each have their own feed, their own discussion, but also allow you to kind of navigate across all of your different projects, all of your different collaborators. And so this is kind of the drop-in space where you initially can sort of have a community for these types of dialogues before you can kind of break off on projects together. We also allow multiple groups to work on projects at once. And so 2 groups might be working together on a project and it can show up on both of their dashboards. And so that's where we've started. And then I'll do a quick peek at where we're headed. So again, we started with really this kind of non-financial capacity building of how do we kind of advance in common with shared knowledge, shared practice. Now we're starting to get into a little bit more dynamism around how we resource projects. And so we're piloting right now with our beta community dashboards for the measurement of projects and the funding of projects. And so I'll bring you through kind of that measurement piece first. You'll see soon every project will be able to set its own kind of measurable goals. And we've been really intent upon ensuring that those measurable goals are both quantitative and qualitative in nature, and sort of inoculating that from the groundswell up, rather than having big NGOs or funders kind of dictate, well, this is what I want to see reported. We've been sitting down with projects and with communities and saying, well, how have you been measuring, and how do you wish you were measuring? And starting to develop these more flexible types of templates and dashboards. And our aim is to be able to start to inform this sort of global aggregate of locally sourced, locally reported, locally verified impacts on everything from, not just how many trees did I plant, but maybe how much research did we publish around this? How many community members did we engage with? What are their images or videos that we collected along the way? What's a qualitative sort of rating around how we're doing? One way we've done this is instead of just having impact reported in one direction, we also allow, we in fact require that everything that's reported is then verified by a community member. And so we can have different roles or different rules around particular impact that then folks can go in and participate in the verification of. And we see this as a potential to not only create more participatory alternatives to what sometimes, for example, can be monopolistic or difficult to sort of access ratings agencies for things like carbon credits, looking at how kind of smallholders and individual smaller groups on the ground can start to access that same type of vetting at scale. And also even opportunities for local economic mobility for folks that are acting as kind of impact validators. And so our aim is to generate on the individual project level kind of whose dollars, what hours have gone into what project in service of what kind of community verified impact. And then over time for this to roll up into this global dashboard where we can start to see, well, how are we doing on water? How are we doing in this country? How are we doing on this particular topic? And so it's very filterable and also kind of disintermediating the way that some of this reporting often happens, so that you can go to the network scale or the group scale. And the way that we've modeled this is automatically, you can then see on the dashboard of a group, the roll up of all the different impacts from all your different projects. And so you can have that transparency at kind of the macro and the micro scale at the same time. The aim is to not treat impact kind of punitively, but instead to look at how can we use data, quantitative and qualitative, to wisely make decisions together around how we advance with common resources. And then the last piece I'll share here before I get briefly into the funding piece is that we see this as not only a valuable tool for general kind of group orientation and sense making for philanthropy. And so we're partnering with foundations to use this as a philanthropic dashboard. Imagine rather than having all of your grantees working on similar things in silos, having them all in a peer community where you're using sort of common, transparent reporting, removing all of the time that's often spent on these sort of grant writing or reporting processes, and instead focusing on allowing these efforts to really focus on just doing the work, but also doing that within that same context where that shared peer learning or resource sharing is happening, so that we're moving the focus away from meeting the demands of the funds and towards just really supporting these efforts and doing what they do best. And then the last piece I'll share there is that we've recognized that philanthropy alone isn't going to be enough to move the needle. And so we've been really looking at this full spectrum of how do we apply the right resources at the right time in the project lifecycle. And I'll get a little bit more into this later, but just to signal that we see this as a way that in stride of kind of measuring these types of data just for general decision making or philanthropy, these are also the types of measurements that can help over time provide direct market access to these projects through the forms of asset-backed securities, ecosystem services, other forms of kind of non-dilutive investment funding that can go directly into these projects. But that can also over time create new forms of indexes that can start to move the needle around how do we define value differently? How do we actually adequately measure some of these spillover values in a way that financial value can start to more closely align with that which we value kind of on the local and project and community level. And then the last piece I'll share here, well, we have direct messaging rolling out soon, which isn't anything huge, but that'll be fun to have and I think useful. We also allow for direct to start philanthropic contributions to projects. And so on the project level, you can, I think you saw earlier, you can kind of click donate directly on that project dashboard right here. But just as well, we're moving towards, once we have enough kind of data rumbling, being able to more equitably distribute financial contributions across whole baskets of projects or entire networks. And so if I'm kind of paralyzed by that indecision around like, well, what's the right organization to choose? How do I give? Instead allowing folks to say, well, I just want to give and I care about these 3 topics, or I'm in this place, or I just want to fund like the last 5% of a bunch of projects so we can help a bunch of projects meet their goals, and then click give, and then through a single checkout, give across an entire basket of projects, and then retain kind of access to those updates and those dashboards across all of those projects. And so we're excited for the potentials there around kind of, more participatory philanthropic pools at the community level and allowing whole networks to kind of resource across all of their projects. And we'll be working with our community directly to determine how some of this is allocated, what some of those formulas are. I think that's enough on the platform for now.
That is so awesome. I love how robust it is. And hopefully everyone can see why I was so excited to partner, why Kinship Earth is so excited to partner with the Open Impact Platform, Open Future Coalition, because we don't want to just bring people into our network and say, okay, you just come and hang out in our network and we're just going to keep you here. We want to empower the entire ecosystem. We want to be connected and to, as George Orwellian often uses the phrase, to make the invisible visible. And I see that what you're doing very much is making the invisible visible. It's opening up those pathways for more collaboration that's seamless. So just fabulous. Do you have more to share?
Yeah, we had just a couple specific notes around both some of our upcoming roadmap, just to cast a little bit more of that vision briefly, and then to ground this in kind of how we see our ongoing participation with Kinship Earth and the ways that you can all participate, including a reminder around how to kind of access the community that we've set up for you. So the last piece I'll share here, and then I'm going to hand it off to Jamaica for the rest, is that where we are right now. So I just showed you kind of the alpha that we launched initially, and then the beta, which is those features that I just shared with you, we've rolled out with a select group of participants over the last couple of weeks. And we're now starting to model that with a handful of specific demonstration projects before we roll that out more globally. And part of that is looking at the full cycle of resourcing projects differently. And so I wanted to touch just a little bit more on the vision around funding. So as I'd mentioned, we've been convening kind of learning groups around the future of funding for the past year and a half. Started out with some assumptions around kind of let's start with philanthropy and we'll get to the rest later. And it became more and more apparent that unless or until we took more of that whole systems approach from the beginning, we were going to be recreating the same problem. And so as a result, we've ended up launching kind of more holistically a series of demonstration projects where we're starting to look at how do we model, kind of coordinate, measure, document, and fund projects beginning to end as kind of core demonstrations in a way that looks at it through this sort of blended model of looking at philanthropy, debt, equity, kind of looking at how do we apply the right forms of resourcing at the right time within the project lifecycle. And so briefly, 3 of our core demonstration projects right now there's one that we mentioned that we're collaborating with the Triangle Foundation and El Puente on in the Amazon, looking at indigenous stewarded land restoration. And our core inquiry there is how do we look at longer term, more spacious kind of grant making cycles that, look at 30-year grants of 5-year cycles that look at, rather than how cheaply can we plant a tree, looking at through a stewardship lens, well, maybe it shouldn't be $1 for reforestation, maybe it should be $5, and $1 should go into planting the tree, and $1 should go into ongoing monitoring and maintenance, and $1 should go into developing business models so that in next year we're not going back to the same foundation for funding. So that's one of the core demonstrations we're working on, and all of these have this kind of local vetting sort of mechanism to them as well. And so enhancing kind of local capacities to vet and identify, even underwrite projects. Another core demonstration we're working on right now is with the land-grant university system in the US, starting with a partnership with the largest historically Black college in the US, looking at how do we essentially capacity build and enhance kind of access of some of these communities to federal matching dollars, and communities that are essentially being penalized for not having access to private dollars and therefore aren't able to unlock public ones. And so we're working on both the enhancement of those initial impacts by using this tool to better provide technical assistance and monitor and report those impacts to the federal government to unlock some more of those matching dollars, but also piloting a revolving loan pool that actually deploys and parks funds in local communities that can then unlock some of these federal dollars. And then we're also exploring, we're working on some projects throughout West Africa, including looking at the aggregation of women smallholder farmers that I alluded to earlier. And so more there, but I'm going to stop here and hand it off to Jamaica.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, I'll be brief because I'm excited to get to the question and answer portion and see what's bubbling for all of you out there. But I'll just share that, as Katie alluded to, the different mapping functions that we have, a big part of what's important to us is story. And not only is sort of story monies and resource flows, story as data and better transparent dashboards and ability to see and qualify data, but it's also about narrative and about story and about impact and about what's happening on the ground. So one of the layers will be inoculating into the platform as a story maps. And I think that coupling of sort of understanding what's happening from like a research and data lens, but also understand what's happening from a social landscape and be able to sort of have this globally interface dashboard that's telling the story of restoration and telling the story of community, resilience, and telling the story of this work that's being done feels like a really important part of having a place that I, as a community builder, haven't had until the opportunity to come and help shape and refine this tool. So just note, because I think for your community as well, just knowing that there's sort of these opportunities coming to really have this be sort of this global dashboard of seeing and understanding and better coordinating and connecting and making context and relevance to what's happening on the ground and what solutions are being applied and where's there still need and like what's really successful. And I think that's one of my biggest joys is every day I'm steeped with actually success stories and innovation and strategy and solution and hard work. And I feel like the narrative changing about actually we do have answers and there are people who are doing incredible work and there are solutions out there. That's a really big part of our goal, is to support the gathering of these stories and data, and then through media partnerships, amplifying those stories out through various sort of independent but also mainstream channels. And as Katie said, working with campaigns then to have like a call to action that comes back and draws resources and support and awareness back into the projects and communities on the ground, and kind of create this regenerative cycle of more of a solutions revolution. And instead of talking and having so much emphasis be on what's wrong, which is an important thing, we need to raise the alarm, but right behind raising the alarm should be, and here's what you can do, like, and here's how you get involved, and here's how you support, and here's what other people are doing. You can sort of grow this knowledge library of application of local interventions at a swell and scale that without this kind of technology, you just can't do. Internet alone won't be enough. We need to have more coordination. So just know that that's a big part of sort of our goal and what we're coming up with. And also we have a curriculum builder. The platform is based on learning management system, which I think is also really interesting, this community, that you could also have a tab of marketplace of different courses and curriculum and really start to see and co-educate each other, co-learning opportunities to start becoming sort of eco-literate and become more engaged global citizens. So that's all kind of coming on the pipe. As Katie mentioned, we're about to hit our beta and roll out this next set of features, but part of our intent is to grow with our communities. Again, we've been very thoughtful about not just sort of blasting this wide open, but curating a culture of communities that are all working in common in partnership. And so just a big part of our intent is to grow along with the communities that are onboarding. And that's a big opportunity for kinship. Like, here we are now and here you are now, but what does that look like to be partners to grow the platform's capacity to enable our partners' intent and goals and what they're trying to achieve and what's that aim? It's very, again, like I said earlier, not like a pull off the shelf SaaS platform. It's an interactive collaboration of how do we leverage technology, and also knowledge, and also, capitals, multi-capitals, to advance in common. So just know that that's an invitation to the Kinship Earth community. And last, I'll just say, we'll get into, and just to show you a minute, your own space we've cultivated, like we've named, we sort of have a specialized, curated, filtered space for the Kinship Earth community, so you can find each other better and you can share about yourself and your projects and your platforms and groups, but it's still also connected to this sort of global impact ecosystem that's growing. So while there's a unique membrane for this community to have a home, it's also connected to and not siloed from this other growing, impact community to create a velocity of exchange. And we'll get into later opportunities to have open office hours, some more trainings and tutorials like your community is just beginning to step on. And we want to make that a very easeful process to learn a new tool and start to figure out how to integrate with it and really make it a really robust, thriving place for this community to have a digital home to start sort of growing together. So we will be following up after this session with opportunities to learn the platform a bit better and ask questions and sort of have some onboarding sessions and trainings so that you feel confident using the platform and it becomes something that's integrated into your community. So we'll kind of follow up with that. But I do see that this is an opportunity to really grow the real potential of Kinship Earth and have that be a model to other networks that are looking to have meaningful impact. It's not just about impact, but it's about how beautiful the Kinship Earth community is. And it's the meaning making and sense making of doing good in the world and modeling what's possible when we come together and collaborate. And so we're just excited to partner with you and kind of help shape and grow this network, but let it be a model to other communities saying, how do we bring our best together? And then how does, that start to grow this like many to many pattern of really hopefully a thriving, solutions ecosystem. So just naming that part. And then one more bit before I hand it back to Katie to show you your particular community is an invitation to join us at our upcoming Open Future Forum. It's just a great way to see and get to know what else is happening in this ecosystem. We have a 3-day virtual session. One is based on civic infrastructure and kind of the built environment. And one day is the kind of regen ag and food systems and nutrition. And then the third day is eco-restoration and climate. So this is an open call to come and join sessions. A lot of them are very roundtable, sort of interactive. But if you're interested in sort of what else is going on in this community, this is a great way to jump in and see what's happening. And we'd love to have some Kinship Earth folk join us here in just 2 weeks. But I'll hand it back to Katie just to talk a little bit, show you your space, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to pop into a quick screen share again. And I believe Lauren sent you all instructions around this space, so I'll be brief. But if you go to kinshipearth.org/community, you'll see that we have a curated space that's set up just for the Kinship Earth community. And before I get into detail, one important aspect of this is that you saw in the previous demo that I shared kind of the whole open impact community, which includes all these global projects and collaborators. And we've taken really a weaving approach, a nodal approach to kind of how we scale even with these distinct communities. And so when we create these sort of curated spaces, our aim is still to focus on kind of cross-pollinating between these different communities and the whole. And so even if you sign up through Kinship Earth or create a group here, so long as your profile is set to public, the rest of the network you're still able to kind of, if you were to go to impact.openfuturecoalition.org and explore the whole network, you also have access to membership to that entire network. And so you can start to further explore collaboration with other efforts. One piece that we're really excited to learn with there is that when individual communities grow or enhance the resources that they have access to, our hope is that the resources for the whole community start to expand. And so someone might list a group or a project in one community over here, But because it appears within the whole network, if it's listed there, then someone else in some other network off somewhere else might have brought in a donor or a network member who ends up being an incredible collaborator of yours or a donor to one of your projects. And so our aim is to really support that many to many. And even when we're creating kind of curated spaces, as much as possible, not to silo that experience and instead look at how we can further power that mutual upliftment. And you'll see here then that if you do go to kinshipearth.org/community, we have this curated space set up. You'll see that I'm logged in here. But if you go to this page and click sign up in the upper right hand corner, if you're not yet logged in, and maybe I'll do that just so that you can quickly see what that looks like to make sure everyone's clear what to do here. So you'll see if you click sign in or sign up, if you click sign up here and you sign up through this frame, then you'll automatically be added to this community and into the right group. The other way for you to join is if you follow a link that I believe Lauren has sent previously to the community. That direct link also adds you to the right groups and into this frame, and then you still go to this URL though to access the community. And then once you've gone through that process, and I believe you've been sent more detailed login instructions, but then you'll be able to log in directly through the Kinship page to access your profile, kind of see all of your projects, everything that you're working on, and explore the community here. We're likely actually changing that word marketplace to community to more reflect kind of the values that we all share. And so you'll be able to see here those who've already signed up. You'll soon, as I mentioned, be rolling out direct messaging, so you'll also be able to direct message one another. But to start, we have set up some initial group spaces, and those all have kind of their own feeds and discussions. I actually don't think I'm a member of Kinship Earth, so I won't be able to show you the feed from my login, but rest assured you do have a newsfeed and discussion tab where you can start engaging with one another, and we really look forward to working with you all directly as well to explore how we can further kind of enhance engagement of these types of online communities and start to turn this convening into specific projects or into applied action.
Love it. Thank you so much for showing us those demonstrations. And I just wanted to mention, I just put up a new page. I saw a little note in the chat about how do we address the ego aspects and the human. And Susan has done that so brilliantly over her career by distilling down the KINS principles. And they may look simple, and yet every single one of them is really encoded with so much wisdom. So there's a page on our site now called Join Us. And that gives you a little bit of background about what you're essentially agreeing to and how we value participation. And then you can hop on board and be part of our community. And there's multiple levels of how people engage. So are we ready to open it up to questions and answers? All right, let me remove the spotlights so we can all see each other. And for those of you who, let's see, so in the reactions bar down at the bottom, yep, Wendy found it. There's a little thing, if you click on the little upside down arrow, or no, actually just click on reactions. There's a place to raise your hand. If you're unable to do that, do this and we can find you. And then I know that Brenda asked a question in the chat, which she doesn't have a microphone. So let's start with Wendy, and then I'll circle around.
Yes, this is really beautiful work you two have done. I mean, you started off by saying the solutions are already out there. Well, for at least the last 2 or 3 years, I've been looking for a solution like this. And in fact, I've been involved with a couple of groups where people have done quite elaborate digital solutions that have been playing about exactly the same thing, but they've always ended up being divided into closed groups. And you're the first group that I've come across that's actually consciously seeing this as a field that we're all participating in. So I really kind of honor the amount of thought and attention that's gone into this, because this it isn't an easy thing to do. And I think you've created something that's really beautiful. And of course, beauty is very much a part of that. Resonant beauty is something that tells us that we've got something special here. So it really, just to say, I'm absolutely delighted. I saw it from like the outside, and now you've talked through it, I really can see the potential of this. So yes, really beautifully done. And I can also see the issues that come up as soon as you start going cross groups, and people can get overwhelmed if suddenly everybody approaches you and you have limited resources. So I know there are issues that arise in these things, but yes, very beautiful work. Thank you very much for sharing it with us.
Thanks so much, Wendy. I'll just say for sure that you named it, that it's a field that we're building. And I think there's the very tangible mechanics and infrastructure, and even our best intent. But I think the truth of what we're really trying to strive for is an emergence of something where we're building, good containers and context, and then we're literally co-sensing this shared field. And approach to how we've built this over the last 2 years has maybe not been a very standard way that people go about building tech platforms, but our approach instead has about cultivating the sense of ability to listen and ride the waves of emergence and kind of cultivate co-emergence and co-arisal together, while we're sort of, still staying in a like tangible world and working on the transition between a paradigm shift that we know we're all aiming towards and the reality of what we're facing. We're not sort of making that leap to a paradigm shift that isn't about how do we actually build the transition capacity to move together and migrate together towards the sort of paradigm we're all aiming at. So our intent has very much been to be responsive to a living field that's showing us and guiding us that we're listening and sensing. It's why this has been, we have a clear roadmap, but then we've been informed by the partners that have shown up and the need that's being asked for. And so that approach itself is very different than how a lot of people approach tech. It's more about leveraging tech to grow collective capacity together. And that's really the aim of what we're up to. So thank you for witnessing that, Wendy. And it's not easy. It's a lot of cultivation personally, as a team, with our partners, as a greater collective society, reintegrating with a living system and like learning forward together. But that's, that's what we're aiming at humbly every day, trying to figure out how to show up for that emergence.
Beautiful. Just before we go to Benjamin, I do want to let everyone know, let's see. So Brenda asked a question about how do you submit a project? And I just want to be clear with everyone and transparent. So Kinship Earth has made an investment to partner with Open Futures Coalition so that we can support them in their growth. And we will be curating our projects. And I believe that if someone else wanted to start a project, set up a meeting with Caitlin in Jamaica and find out about what would be involved in setting something up for yourself, so that we can be supporting the work that they're doing as well. Okay, so Benjamin, thank you for joining us. And what's your question? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, so gosh, I have so much I want to say, but I'll try to keep it brief and just ask a question. So many things have happened, and this has already been mentioned in the past like this. I had an effort called Wiki Positive, which was around for 9 years. And the problem that happened there really was a lot of spam and a lot of initial interest that faded. So, and I've heard that from other groups that were similar. One in Holland, we went over to meet with the NVU Foundation, and we were going to collaborate with them, and they decided not to go forward because they felt that the problem was marketing and getting people to use it. So I think that this, what you're doing is phenomenal and something I've been trying to do for many years, but I think the technology and your approach to it is really, really good. My question is how much you have reached out to existing groups. I just thought of a few, there's Drawdown, there's Kiva, there's Monch in London that is tracking philanthropy and trying, and another one called Enlight Aid that's tracking philanthropy, trying to do it technologically so you can actually know that your money went where you wanted it to go. And I'm chairman of a company called Infinite Workflow, which I'm sure you didn't know, which is doing the same kind of technological development for regional coordination of social services in the U.S. Anyway, so it's a question. It's also, just hoping we can have further conversation about it. August, I did have one other question. Just I'm missing, what I was doing on Wiki Positive. What we were doing was really trying to get the whole spectrum of financial input. So all the way from philanthropy through private investing and including public investing, because there's nothing really wrong with public companies. It's just another way of getting funded. But there are many that nobody knows about that got funded that way that are actually trying to make a difference, and nobody knows about them. So just asking if you want to scale also into the, into actual investment world. It's a scary space.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I can kick off by saying that, well, first off, the Infinite Workflow platform sounds magnificently aligned, and I would love to learn more around the work that you're doing, particularly as we do more work around kind of education and social services in the US. I will say, to briefly answer your question around our relation to other platforms, I've talked to 3 other platforms this week. I think we keep our roster pretty full with trying to find the others out there and look at interoperability. I know before we started, we had searched kind of far and wide for a system that was sort of approaching in the lateral way that we were looking to, and we couldn't quite find it, and at the same time have really taken an approach to looking at how we can collectively strengthen one another's efforts. And so we're API based. We've already been in discussions with close to a dozen other platforms around setting up intersection points of whether it's connecting with existing corporate giving platforms to then leverage our platform to direct that giving to particular projects, to connecting with existing kind of payments or philanthropic sites, to other community sites. We've been experimenting in kind of cross-platform profiles, or even sort of interoperability of posts across contexts. And so we've also been keeping an eye on the work of some of the folks that you'd mentioned, and would love to talk with them directly as well. So yeah, just know that that's a huge part of our intent. And in terms of scaling into investment, that is also, while daunting, that is also a part of our intent. We've been through kind of an evolution in how we've been looking at the funding piece. I will admit that day one, our view of that was pretty darn naive. I said, you know what, we're going to start to securitize the capital I impact. We're going to figure out an index that's across all the different impacts, and we're going to transform how we define value and make that investable. And realize that we weren't quite there yet. Even if we have the tech to enable it, there's a lot of other alignment that needs to happen first. And so we've kind of started, and on the other end of that spectrum, we then thought, well, let's start with philanthropy, because that's simpler from a compliance perspective. And we recognized that just thinking about philanthropy wasn't going to get us there either, because that was, again, not taking a holistic approach. And so where we've landed is that we are going to have to effectively be able to support that whole spectrum. I will share that although we haven't rolled it out yet, we have been kind of building in parallel capacity to equity crowdfund on the platform to kind of measure and securitize assets in a compliant way. And so that's going to pop up in the future. The way that we've been looking at things like impact measurement, for example, is that we were able to mint kind of verified portfolios of impact in a way that can become investable. Where possible, we're looking at partnering with existing kind of trading venues and platforms as well. Yeah, I guess the brief answer to your question is that yes, we are touching on investment already. We expected to be tiptoeing into it a bit more slowly. Where we've found ourselves is kind of already jumping in there, and happy to discuss that further and learn from all that you've learned.
Thank you. Yeah, great.
Benjamin, I'll just say too before Fee, I see Fee's hand, and I know Brenda has a question on the table, but I'll say too that it's important to remember the stage we're at too, is we started very intentionally with an alpha community to help ensure that what we build is informed by the kind of partners that we want to grow with. And we're just now hitting our beta stride and starting to bring on networks of networks. Kinship Earth obviously is one, but we have others that are starting to onboard as well. And so kind of where we're at is we haven't done any outreach, and we haven't needed to. It's been a very much trust network endorsement. We are overloaded, as Deb knows, who works with us. There's so much inbound of so many amazing people and projects and things that we're just sort of growing organically with the fact that this just becomes something that connection by connection by connection of really meaningful engagement is growing us naturally. We may hit a stride where it's time to like take it public, but we won't do that until what we've crafted is this incredibly rich, flourishing ecosystem of a trust network, so that's the foundation of what other people are stepping into. So in terms of sort of that growth of like, how do you outreach and how do you keep thriving going for us, that's always going to be a question with tech platforms or anything. That iteration in tech is actually how we're progressing so fast. I value the wiki platforms and the, Wiser Earth and all these other, places where this has popped up, and then compost to become the next thing. And we're willing to be that. If we're no longer relevant, we'll continue to be agile and responsive as long as we can. And that's true. So our intent is to be around a long time, but that form may take shape in different ways because we really are looking to be this sort of agile, responsive mechanism of what's needed. So we see longevity in our future. And again, we haven't even attempted yet to be marketing. Haven't had to. And so we'll sort of take that as what's really actually useful and beneficial. So yeah, I hope that answers part of your question too.
Thank you so much. Yeah, wonderful.
To keep people involved.
I'm so very excited. Yes, I'd love to stay in touch.
Meaningful, and their allies are there, and what's happening benefits their life and like grows their capacity to do good work. I think that becomes sort of an incentive to keep hopefully showing up in a space like this.
Wonderful. If I can be.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much, Benjamin. And to learn more about Benjamin's work, by the way, you can see a couple of his interviews on our website at kinshipearth.org, and then just go to the videos tab. So is it Fee or Fi? How do you pronounce your name?
It's Fee.
Fee, hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I am not with any big organizations or anything. I help men and women heal their inner child so they can create their heaven on earth. And so they can live that desired life that they've always wanted to. And with that work is that I show them how they can live their life that they uniquely need to from heart source rather than mind source, and get the shift of heart source with mind source from how society has made us all be front and center mind of control and dominance and fast pace. So hearing everything you have said, something that had just triggered something that I was doing with my work earlier is, how the world is so like making robots into humans and doing the AIs and whatnot. And they're using humans to make robots be like humans. And that's the whole mind source rather than the heart source living. So humans are not using technology the way that they need to, but you guys are. You're totally opening up for us to actually be able to say, oh, that's the right way to do it. That's the heart source living with the technology that we make and build and create. It's not meant to be so harsh and dominant and tyranny of it. So that just, as soon as you said that, I was like, I just have to say thank you so much for this, for that connection. There's so much more that I'm probably just going to blur out, but with this community as well for individual workers who do this special practices. No, hold on one second, please. Excuse me. This is for individuals as well who are not in a community to build a community, correct?
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can show up as a person in context to a project or a group, but also just start to find a network and resource and join things. And that's absolutely what it's here for as well. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and P, I just want to say really briefly that part is so important. Katie and I talk often about sort of this hyper web 3.0, like AI everything, and this sort of technocratic dystopia that certain agenda.
We gotta go outside today.
And I genuinely feel like technology has a gift for humanity to unlock our true potential. I really do. And if we look at it through that lens, technology is accessing something in us to let us see each other and be part of this living system. It's helping us innovate like a living web of intelligence and connection. And that is an incredibly noble way for technology to sort of serve human consciousness and evolution. But we have to wield that with maturity and wisely, because it can equally be our destruction. We're right at that threshold of, do we take this incredible power and do we wield it towards more oppression and extraction and like disconnect from ourselves as part of a living system? Or do we take this incredible power and we let it show us how to become part of a living system again and integrate as part of a living whole, and like see these points of connection and context and meaning making? And then over time, our friend from Regenerative Footprint, Amber Bassett, has said technology is a scaffolding to grow the fruit. If you think of like a tomato, you're not growing a tomato because the scaffolding is really the point. The scaffolding helps create shape and form to something that's growing this fruit. And we've really, as soon as she said it, it just hit all these signals of like, yes, that's the way we're approaching technology, as a scaffolding to grow the real fruit of human potential, rather than it be continuing to oppress humanity's real potential. It's about connecting us more deeply. So that's definitely our approach, because tech is a very, very shifty topic. There's a lot there and it can go a lot of ways, but that's not what we're doing here. So thanks, Bea, for naming all of that.
Yes, thank you very much. Definitely the beam of light that us humans need. If we can't really see that beam of light from within, at least it's, technology is that extra sign. Oh yeah, that's what it's leading me to.
Awesome. Thank you, Fee, for joining us. And just a little time check. We've got just about 15 minutes left. So I'm going to pass it to George.
Thanks. Yeah, great work. I really appreciate all the efforts that's gone into building this platform and how aligned it is with the vision of Buckminster Fuller. But I wanted to suggest that one of the great collaborations that could happen between the Open Futures Coalition and Kinship Earth is that we have some people like who comes to mind is Alicia, and of course Susan, and a lot of other people on the group already, but they've already got this experience of how they came up with a vision, for instance, bringing solar to the world, and how that ended up playing out. So if we met with them and mapped that, and then figured out how to use technology to expedite and make that process all the more efficient right now, that could be super useful for more efficiently moving the regenerative solutions we need on the planet. And the other thing is transparency and data security. So we've got some things I'll talk to you about offline regarding those areas, because without really accurate security that you can trust, anything is vulnerable to being hacked or ransomware. And then with comprehensive, detailed sensor inputs on what's going on, where every living thing is actually a sensor on the planet, and then we can check, where the toxins are. But that gives us a clear way to look at what's going on the planet that's, in essence, immune from intervention by people that are trying to misinform humanity, and help us make better decisions that aren't going to be triggering the fear response, but will go right into what's truly better for us. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, George. I will say to that first piece, I see one of the great potentials of partnership with this network to be some of that intergenerational bridge building. And that's a huge interest in our work, is how do we kind of carry on particular work intergenerationally and learn and ensure that we're sort of creating the right repositories for that knowledge. And as well, a specific invitation is that we have a session on kind of intergenerational bridge building in particular at our upcoming forum. And Lauren, I believe we discussed with you that as a potential intersection to highlight some of the work of Kinship Earth and to brainstorm potentials for that together. So I just wanted to name that immediate potential as well.
Yes, I'm very excited about the learning management system. We've been beginning to codify some of the learnings and teachings from the elders in our community. This session is an example of how we are storing and preserving and sharing information amongst the community, and then taking that now and making it available through the Open Impact platform, allowing more people who are like-minded to be able to connect and find it, is definitely part of our roadmap. So we're excited about that. All right. Any final comments, questions as we begin to bring this to a close? I'd like to invite Caitlin and Jamaica once again, if you want to put the link in for the upcoming Open Future Forum. And George, you've got another comment to add.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Caitlin and Jamaica, how can we help you? Because a big part of how the Kinship Earth Network works is that you ask, what do you need? And our spirit of generosity then gets engaged and magic happens. So how can we help you?
I'll start with some ideas. I think that one, we're really thrilled by the potential to learn with the Kinship Earth community as a kind of flagship example of what it means to weave community on the platform, or what it means to kind of weave networks with other networks. And so I think mutual enrichment of one another's work directly by helping Kinship Earth to be the most vibrant network it can be is a way of helping us. And so that's kind of the most immediate and exciting potential I see, and kind of double clicking on that one. I think helping to advance that mission by identifying particular projects that the community is looking to advance and really stewarding those projects and helping kind of model and test some of the tools and refining them based on the needs of those projects, or that coordination at scale is one helpful way.
Susan and Walter are on Finca Sagrada with the Kogi, and this would give a chance to put an Indigenous group on the Open Futures Coalition and serve as a touch point for other Indigenous wisdom around the planet to be integrated. And then
we would love to do that. We would love to do that. Standing ovation. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I think I would add that, like, it's the bridge building, and all of you are such bridgers. And I think part of it is let's keep building, let's keep weaving a web together, essentially. And the more that you get sort of a feeling of belonging to what we're all doing together, and this is a platform that belongs to the commons, it doesn't really belong to us, as that becomes something that feels authentic and that we start to see more vitality, our joy would be to really start then bridging these other communities and start web weaving together. And I think that's what one of the gifts of Kinship Earth is, that you cross a lot of territories, you have a lot of connections to the web and points. And so I think just knowing that we're here to see what we can grow together is a big part of the ask and the hope. And to that point too, yeah, like that's the work that I've started to bridge into as well, Susan, is, I won't name names, but we have some incredible Indigenous networks that we are in a dynamic with, because there's a lot of, cross-cultural collaboration is tricky, and there's trauma and there's wounding and there's tenderness there, and it takes time, and building relationships of trust take time. But I think that if those relationships have been built, knowing that you can be an ambassador of knowing that this is another place to have hopefully support to those communities on the ground, and those who've been traditionally maybe left out, and tech hasn't been a way that they've been able to leverage connection. I think that those are the kinds of relationships we're eagerly seeking to build more diversity, other languages. There's like lots of ways that we want to make.
Because the Kogi is one of the 2 tribes left on Earth that still has its original ways of communication spiritually. And the Kogi have put their arms around our farm in Ecuador, and we're planning to have sessions with them where they can describe how it's been through history. So we'd love to have anyone interested in that let us know, so that we can have a little team that puts that together. But thank you for suggesting the idea because it's really important.
Well, so what I'd like to do is I'm going to share screen briefly. And Lucas, I just saw your hand up. I want to let people know. So for those of you who are here, I put the link in the chat. It goes directly to our Kinship Earth community page. If you want to share it, you can go to Kinship Earth, and we've added a Join Us tab up here. And it goes over a little bit of our membership criteria in terms of what we expect and how we collaborate, what our perspective is, how we cooperate, the KINS principles that Susan has embodied and shared and have been proven successful. We've got a little feature here about what you can expect to be part of the community. So you can create a personal profile, you can participate in groups, you can plug into the greater ecosystem, you can collaborate and contribute to projects. And then once you fill out name and email address here, I'll just set the example real quick. And then it will take you right to our community page, where then you can, if you don't already have a profile, it will give you an option to sign up. And so that's the first step. First step is sign up, and then you'll be part of our group, and then we can continue the conversation offline and begin to build these collaborative projects. And we are going to be working closely with Caitlin in Jamaica to help steward our community and guide us in developing the projects and the collaboration and setting our goals. So yeah, we're very excited. Lucas, welcome.
Thank you, Lauren. I guess it's almost the end of the conversation, so these could all be conversations that continue sometime. But yeah, thank you to everyone. And yeah, thank you to Jamaica and Caitlin for the presentation and the work you've been doing. It's just really extraordinary. And sort of as Benjamin alluded to, you know, some people have been making efforts in this direction, but where you've taken this already since your launch less than a year ago looks extraordinary. So, so I've been working with the Kogi or Kagaba here in Colombia, and so this would be something we could all talk more about at another time, but it's very exciting, the idea of a kind of collaboration, and what Wendy was mentioning, these ideas that came up at this recent meeting in Europe where some of the Kogi were present. And then there's also sort of deep questions to get into, which maybe you've already encountered. Jamaica had some fascinating observations about kind of the role of technology and how we can use it to serve kind of the future we all want to give birth to. And there are these paradoxes that arise, you know, when I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, there's this classic book called Seeing Like a State by James Scott that talks about this concept of legibility, where in the effort to kind of organize everything and make everything kind of legible, you do have these paradoxes where you incentivize certain ways, certain types of structures that might be very kind of modern, but quite different from more ecological traditional structures. And I witnessed with the Kogi a process where, for the sake of protecting their sacred sites, their spiritual elders had to make this kind of painful decision to share, kind of turn into data for the state so that they could legally protect these sacred sites, wisdom that they actually, even within their community, wasn't shared with everyone. Only certain kind of shamans in training through years of training learned the stories of each sacred site. And so then to take a kind of many-year training story process and turn it into data, they saw the need to do it because they had to protect their sacred sites, but it wasn't straightforward. So there's a lot to kind of think through about transitioning between those kinds of worlds.
Yeah, very.
Yeah, I would love to just explore that further. And I think that last piece you touched on around membranes is really important too. And this kind of ties back to some of the earlier dialogue around tech and living systems, and how do we kind of use it as this tool and this extension that deepens our immersion and kind of the earth and our lived experience and augments it rather than further kind of floating us away from it. There's so much more than what you mentioned, but I know we're limited on time, so I'd love to just have a follow-up dialogue to dig more into the work that you're doing.
Wonderful.
I think transparency is going to be key in giving nature a voice. If we give nature a voice and we're transparent about it, then there's that'll empower the systems.
You are so right. Yes. Listen to what this man says.
And that's
Woo.
why we have selected Open Future Coalition and the Open Impact Platform, because of that alignment in heart and in spirit and connection to nature. So Stephen, I see you have your hand up, and then we'll be bringing this home for a close soon. Oh, feel free to unmute yourself, Stephen.
Thank you. I do want to point one other thing. It's very apparent to me, and it's very clear to me, that when you look at men alone working with technology, somehow we don't find our way to the field. We don't find our way to the larger connection that the two of you here have done. And that's why I applaud your work. That's why here at Kinship Earth, we recognize that that's a major breakthrough. You don't see that happening on any other platform. And I just want to acknowledge that that's a very, very important thing. The other thing is, I wanted to just say, for the benefit of Wendy here, because Wendy and I were on Escaret Island with the Kogi in Stockholm. And I was telling her about Lucas and the anthropologist that met with us, Lauren and I, and the Kogi on Finca Sagrada. He's really a true resource. I just want to praise you a little bit, Lucas. Right now, he's in Colombia. I'm hoping to connect him with the Gaia Union. For those of you who have not seen this incredible work that's being done by a sort of a sister organization, I will call Gaia Union a sister organization. I've met them. They're doing incredible work along the same lines that we're doing. And their website is www.gaia-union.com. I'm not going to do any more advertising for them, but I'm just saying, you know, all of us that are working toward the same goal of connecting humanity to Mother Earth and to raising the consciousness, because one of the things that Wendy is doing is something called IDGs. How many of you have heard of IDGs? Any of you? Any of you have heard of IDGs? Yeah. Okay, that's Inner Development Goals. And there's a conversation going on now among the global leaders of, I would say, enlightenment, that we can't accomplish the SDGs unless we do the IDGs at least at the same time or even ahead of the SDGs. In other words, the goal of Kinship Earth is to help raise the consciousness to the level where we can, as a humanity, move through this period of chaos when there's a rebalancing of the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine happening. It's going to be hard times. Everybody knows that. When you give birth, as all the women here know, or most of the women here know, you give birth and it's painful. And that's what we're doing now. We're here in this world right now giving birth to this new thing. And you can see how painful it already is with Russia attacking Ukraine. These are all symptoms of that. This resistance to that rebalancing of the sacred feminine and sacred masculine. Anyway, I'm getting off my soapbox. You can tell I'm a professor. So I'll get off the screen now and pass it on to somebody else.
All right, before we go to Wendy, I want to just echo what Stephen said, but I also want to bring some presence to those people who are here in this room. Many of you have not raised your hand and have not spoken up, but I want to honor and acknowledge the level of heart and the level of intelligence and the amazing work that you are doing in your sectors all across the world. We look forward to more opportunities to grow as a community and to find the coherence amongst ourselves. And we will be presenting more opportunities to do that. So at the risk of running over time just a little bit, Wendy, I'd love to let you bring us the closing comments, and then I'll bring it all home.
I was just going to say, I've literally just come off an Evolutionary Leaders webinar where we've been working on the unitive narrative, which is now going global, and it's going at high level in the United Nations. That's what we've been talking about. But it's everything we're talking about. So it's that sense that this is a narrative that's going high level within governments, but we're all saying the same thing, and there's just huge power around that. So I'll be letting them know what we're doing, and not, that these multiple layers of everybody now moving to a place where it's about mutualism and reciprocity and collaboration, and just what a privilege it is to be part of the process, really. So yeah.
We're so delighted to have you joining our leadership team, Wendy. Thank you so much. We're so delighted to partner with Jamaica and Caitlin and the Open Future Coalition. Deb is on the team. Thank you, Deb, for being here today. I want to thank everyone who is in this room, and or if you're watching the video. We know that you have been drawn here for a reason. We know that you are one of our kindred spirits. And as we collectively learn to know each other and find each other, we are connecting to, what Teilhard de Chardin called the noosphere, and we are awakening as a collective. And think about the power and the potential to have impact, to influence change when we join together as a community. So we are so honored. Caitlin, Jamaica, any closing thoughts before we say farewell? Thank you so much for being with us today.
I'll just say it's an honor to share this space with you all. Thank you so much. Your kind of deep listening and presence is so felt here, and we're really honored to be expanding upon our work with this particular community. And I'll also be sure to drop our email addresses into the chat before we hop off so that you know how to get into touch with us as well.
Wonderful. Jamaica?
Just gratitude. Yeah, I just a trust and appreciation that the timing is right and there's sort of an alignment unfolding. And so we look forward to emerging with you. Just know that we're definitely here. I feel like there's a lot of, we look forward to getting to know you. I feel like there's a lot of folks in this space that we probably have a lot to grow with, and like work that we're here to do or service that we're here to accomplish together. So we look forward to getting to know you better, whether it's in the platform or reaching out to us and saying, hey, I'd like to tag on something you said. I think that we're excited to grow with this community. And yeah, just appreciate you all so much. And Lauren, you hold such exquisite space. So thank you for such a heartfelt holding of this space. And we look forward to maybe jumping in on these calls and get to know you all maybe that way going forward. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to be here. Remember to go to kinshipearth.org/community, create your profile. We can continue to connect and collaborate that way. And for now, feel free to unmute yourselves and say bye-bye and farewell and aloha.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Have a wonderful day.
Gracias. Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you for joining us for Kinship Earth Connections. We encourage you to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. To receive invitations to our upcoming events and connect with our community of kindred spirits, please visit us at kinshipearth.org. Thank you.